The words hung in the air like a grenade with a pin pulled. Mom, he's not your son. Lisa Martinez had waited 32 years to say those words out loud. Her mother sat frozen, hand covering her mouth. The man beside her, the man she'd raised, loved, and called her firstborn for over 3 decades, went pale. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his expression unreadable. The DNA results were already in his hands. But what they revealed wasn't just about mistaken identity. It was about a hospital cover-up, a desperate switch, and two families whose lives had been tangled together by a secret that should have stayed buried forever. The studio audience was silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Lisa stood in the center of the stage, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "That's my brother," she said, pointing across the stage to a young man sitting in the second row. "And you've been raising him for 32 years thinking he was yours." Margaret Santos, Lisa's mother, looked like she'd been struck, her face drained of color. Beside her sat Daniel, the son she'd raised, the man she'd celebrated 32 birthdays with, the child she'd brought home from the hospital in June of 1992. "Lisa, what are you talking about?" Margaret whispered. Dr. Phil held up a folder. "Before we go any further, I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with here." Lisa came to us 6 weeks ago with a story that seemed impossible. She claimed that her brother Daniel isn't actually her biological brother, that there was a mix-up at the hospital, and that her real brother has been living just 40 miles away, raised by another family for his entire life. Daniel finally found his voice. "This is insane. Lisa, what's gotten into you?" But Lisa didn't back down. She'd come too far to stop now. 3 months ago, I did one of those DNA ancestry tests, she began. You know, the ones where you spit in a tube and they tell you where your family came from. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just thought it would be fun. She paused, gathering herself. The results came back and showed me a list of DNA relatives. There was one match labeled close family, possibly half-sibling. His name was Marcus Webb. I'd never heard of him in my life. The audience leaned in collectively. This was the kind of story that didn't feel real. I was confused, so I messaged him through the site. We started comparing information. Our birthdays were one day apart, June 14th and June 15th, 1992. We were both born at St. Mary's Hospital in Houston. And when we started sharing photos, Lisa's voice cracked. She pulled out her phone and held it up. On the screen was a photo of a young man who could have been Daniel's twin. He looks exactly like my dad, exactly like our grandfather, exactly like me. And Daniel, she turned to face the man she'd grown up calling her brother. "You don't look like any of us. You never have. And Mom, you know it's true." Margaret was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't denying it. "I tried to tell myself I was imagining things," Lisa continued. "But then I convinced Marcus to take a more detailed DNA test, one that could confirm sibling relationships. We both did it. And when the results came back, Dr. Phil opened the folder in his hands. Lisa, with your permission, can I share what these results showed?" She nodded. According to this certified DNA analysis, Lisa Martinez and Marcus Webb share 50% of their DNA. They are full biological siblings. There is a 99.9% probability that they share both parents. The studio erupted in gasps and whispers. Daniel sat rigid, his face unreadable. "Daniel," Dr. Phil said gently, "did you have any idea?" "No," Daniel said, but his voice was hollow. "I mean, I knew I looked different, but I never thought, how is this even possible?" That was the question everyone wanted answered. To understand how this happened, you have to go back 32 years to a chaotic night at St. Mary's Hospital. It was June 14th, 1992. The maternity ward was understaffed and overwhelmed. A summer flu had swept through the nursing staff, leaving them shorthanded during one of their busiest months of the year. Margaret Santos went into labor at 11:47 p.m. She was 26 years old, about to have her second child. Lisa was 3 years old at home with her grandmother. Margaret's husband, Roberto, was beside her, nervous and excited. In a room next door, Claire Webb was in labor with her first child. She was alone, Her husband was deployed overseas with the military and wouldn't meet his son for another 3 months. Both women gave birth within an hour of each other. Margaret's son arrived at 12:23 a.m. on June 15th. Claire's son arrived at 12:51 a.m. same day. Both were healthy baby boys. Both were immediately taken to the nursery for routine checks and cleaning. And that's where everything went wrong. The nurse on duty that night was named Patricia Reeves. She'd been working double shifts for a week straight. She was exhausted, and in her exhaustion, she made a mistake that would alter 4 lives forever. When she brought the babies back to their mothers, she got them mixed up. Margaret Santos went home with Claire Webb's baby. Claire Webb went home with Margaret's son. And nobody noticed. How could they not notice? That's what everyone asks. But newborns look surprisingly similar. And first-time mothers don't know what their baby is supposed to look like yet. By the time the babies developed distinct features, it was too late. They were already bonded to the families raising them. Patricia Reeves knew what she'd done. She realized it the next day when she came back to work and reviewed the paperwork. The footprints didn't match. The hospital ID bracelets had been swapped. She could have come forward. She should have. But she was terrified of losing her job, losing her nursing license, facing a lawsuit that would destroy her financially. So she buried the evidence. She destroyed the footprint records. She falsified the paperwork. And she convinced herself that the babies were too young to know the difference, that they'd be fine, that it was better to let them stay with the families they'd already gone home with. It was a choice that haunted her for the rest of her life. But secrets have a way of surfacing. And 32 years later, a simple DNA test had finally exposed the truth. Backstage, Marcus Webb was waiting. He'd flown in from Austin that morning, nervous and unsure about what he was walking into. Dr. Phil brought him out during the commercial break. The audience watched as this stranger, this genetic copy of the Santos family, walked onto the stage. Margaret gasped. It was like looking at her husband 30 years ago. Same eyes, same smile, same way of holding his shoulders. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Roberto. He looks just like Roberto." Marcus stood awkwardly, unsure where to look. Daniel stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. "Marcus," Dr. Phil said gently, "thank you for being here. I know this can't be easy." Marcus nodded. "It's surreal. I found out 3 months ago that my entire life might be based on a mistake. That the parents I love might not be my biological parents. That somewhere out there, my real family has been living without me." "Tell us about your family," Dr. Phil prompted. "The Webbs. What was your childhood like?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Good. Really good, actually. My mom raised me mostly on her own while my dad was deployed. He's career military, retired now. They're great parents. I never felt like anything was missing." "Did you ever question whether you were really their son?" "Not really. I mean, I look like my dad. Everyone always said so. Same build, same coloring. It never occurred to me that I might not be biologically his." Dr. Phil pulled out another folder. "But when you took the DNA test, you discovered something different." Marcus nodded. "The test showed that my dad isn't my biological father. And my mom, she took one too after Lisa contacted me. She's not my biological mother either." The weight of those words settled over everyone. 2 families tangled together by a mistake made in a hospital nursery 3 decades ago. Margaret finally spoke. "Where are your parents?" "The Webbs." "Are they here?" "They're backstage," Marcus said. "They wanted to meet you, if you're willing." Margaret looked at Daniel. He looked shell-shocked, unable to process what was happening. "I don't understand," Daniel said quietly. "So you're saying I'm not a Santos? That my whole life has been a lie?" "Not a lie," Dr. Phil corrected gently. "A mistake. A tragic mistake. But Margaret is still your mother. She raised you. She loved you. That doesn't change. But she's not my real mother," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "She's the only mother you've ever known," Dr. Phil replied. "That makes her real. Could you accept that the person you thought you were isn't who you actually are?" Dr. Phil brought out Claire and Thomas Webb during the next segment. They walked onto the stage holding hands, looking nervous but determined. Claire was 58 now, with graying hair and kind eyes. Thomas was tall and broad-shouldered, still carrying himself with military posture despite being in his 60s. When Claire saw Marcus sitting next to Margaret, she stopped walking. Her hand went to her chest. "That's him," she whispered. "That's our son." Thomas put his arm around her, steadying her as they crossed the stage. The introductions were awkward at first. What do you say to the people who accidentally took your child? What do you say to the family who raised the son you never met? But then Margaret did something unexpected. She stood up, walked over to Claire, and hugged her. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said. "I'm so sorry you missed watching him grow up." Claire broke down. 32 years of grief she'd never understood suddenly made sense. She'd suffered from severe postpartum depression after Marcus was born. She'd struggled to bond with him. She'd blamed herself for years, thinking she was a bad mother. Now she knew why. Some part of her had sensed that something was wrong, that the baby she'd brought home wasn't the baby she'd carried. "I used to look at him and feel like I was missing something," Claire said through tears. "I loved him. God, I love him so much. But there was always this distance I couldn't explain. I thought it was my fault." "It wasn't your fault," Margaret said firmly. "None of this was our fault." Thomas looked at Daniel, his biological son, raised by another family. "Can I?" he started, his voice rough with emotion. "Can I talk to you?" Daniel stood slowly. He walked over to this stranger who was apparently his biological father. They stood face to face, studying each other. "You have my mother's nose," Thomas said quietly. "My mom, your grandmother, she passed away 5 years ago. But you look just like her." Daniel's composure finally cracked. "I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know how to process it." "Neither do we," Thomas admitted. "But we have time. We can figure it out together." It wasn't a perfect reunion. It wasn't even a comfortable one. But it was a start. But there was one more piece to the story. One more person who needed to be part of this conversation. Dr. Phil pulled out a letter. "Before this taping, our team did some investigating. We tracked down Patricia Reeves, the nurse who was on duty the night you were both born. She's 81 years old now, living in a nursing home. She's been carrying this secret for 32 years. He held up the letter. "She wrote this when she found out you were coming on the show. She asked if I would read it. Are you all willing to hear what she has to say?" Everyone nodded, though the tension was palpable. Dr. Phil began reading. "Dear Margaret, Claire, Daniel, and Marcus, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know the truth about what happened that night. I was exhausted. I've been working 16-hour shifts because we were so short-staffed. When I took your babies to the nursery, I laid them in their bassinets and turned away to answer a phone call. When I turned back, I couldn't remember which baby was which. They looked so similar in that moment. I made my best guess, and I was wrong." The letter continued, describing how Patricia realized her mistake the next day, and how fear paralyzed her into inaction. "I've thought about you every single day for 32 years. I've wondered if you were happy, if you were healthy, if you ever suspected the truth. I robbed you of time together. I robbed you of knowing your biological children from birth. There's no excuse for what I did. I can only tell you that I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, impossibly sorry." The room was silent. Even the audience seemed to be holding their breath. "She's dying," Dr. Phil said quietly. "Stage 4 cancer. She has maybe 3 months left. She wanted you to know that carrying this secret has destroyed her, that she spent 3 decades wishing she'd been brave enough to tell the truth." Margaret wiped tears from her face. "I don't know if I can forgive her, but I understand why she stayed silent. Fear makes us do terrible things." Claire nodded. "The boys are alive. They're healthy. They're here. It could have been so much worse. It was grace neither of them thought they'd be capable of. But somehow, in the face of such profound loss and confusion, they chose compassion over anger. The families decided to take things slowly. Daniel and Marcus agreed to meet for coffee without cameras, without pressure. Just 2 men trying to figure out who they were in relation to each other. Margaret and Claire exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. They talked about the possibility of shared holidays, of slowly blending their families in ways that felt natural rather than forced. Thomas reached out to Roberto, who hadn't been able to attend the taping due to work. They talked on the phone for 2 hours, 2 fathers trying to make sense of an impossible situation. There were hard conversations ahead, therapy sessions, identity struggles, Moments of grief for the lives they didn't get to live. But there was also something unexpected, a strange kind of gratitude. Both families loved the sons they'd raised. Both Daniel and Marcus had grown up in good homes with parents who cared about them. The mix-up had been devastating, but it hadn't destroyed them. 3 months after the show aired, Lisa posted a photo on social media. It showed her standing between Daniel and Marcus, her arms around both of them. The caption read, "Turns out I have two brothers. Lucky me." It was messy. It was complicated, but it was healing. As for Patricia Reeves, she passed away 6 weeks after the episode aired. But before she died, both families sent her letters. They didn't absolve her of responsibility, but they thanked her for finally telling the truth. And they told her they forgave her. She died knowing she'd done the right thing, even if it came 32 years too late. If this story moved you, think about the secrets you might be carrying, the truths you're afraid to speak. Sometimes the hardest thing we'll ever do is admit we made a mistake. But the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living in a lie. Would you have been able to forgive the nurse who changed your life? Could you accept a family you didn't choose? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about truth, family, and the complicated beauty of forgiveness, subscribe. Because the most powerful transformations come from the courage to face what we've been hiding.